Hello and welcome. It had been roughly a decade since Marvel Comics published an event that affected all their current titles, the last one possibly being the Onslaught saga from 1996. With the success of Avengers Disassembled, it was decided to resurrect the event's strategy for a new millennium and address the obvious, dangling plot thread from that story, which was the clear and present danger of Wanda Maximoff, also known as the Scarlet Witch. Originally, House of M was intended to be a crossover series between the Avengers and the X-Men. This is why the Astonishing X-Men and the New Avengers are part of the logo. However, it was decided to take this premise and create an event, rather than a storyline that concurrently ran through two titles. Obviously, from this point forward, there is nothing but spoilers. Proceed with caution. The prelude to this event begins in Excalibur number 13 and 14. Doctor Strange and Professor X attempt to cure Wanda, or to get her to face her trauma, or something. It's never made clear what they would consider a cure. They simply talk about what doesn't seem to work while Wanda sleeps. This is where House of M begins. Professor X discusses Wanda's condition with the Avengers and the X-Men, hoping to find a solution. The only two solutions are murder or, not murder and hope for the best. Pietro, Wanda's brother, believes that murder is the only option being discussed, so he convinces Wanda to change reality. From there, the entire Marvel universe becomes a slightly ideal utopia where mutants rule. All things considered, humans don't have it too bad either. The Deus Ex Machina is a young girl named Layla Miller, a mutant who can restore the memories of the prior reality. The bulk of the miniseries is gently exploring this new reality, while Layla restores the proper memories to various superheroes. This leads to an all-out assault on Magneto, the leader of the world and the man protecting Wanda. The reasoning being, he's the one responsible for convincing Wanda to change reality. This conflict leads Wanda to say the three words that come with one very large asterisk beside them: no more mutants. Reality changes back to what it was previously, with one exception. The mutant population has been devastated and is now nearly extinct. Overall, House of M is an alternate history type of story. It's a bit like an extended issue of What If. The twist ending is the metaphorical reset button being pressed, creating a new normal that resembles the reality similar to the one prior to the event taking place. Everything changes, but it still remains the same. In other words, the status quo has been re-established with some refinements. This may be a defining feature of all following Marvel events. Baseline normalcy will be replaced with a new element that affects the entire Marvel universe. The repercussions of those changes are then explored, until a new event comes along and changes everything again. Basically, House of M launches the story of the Marvel Universe. Put another way, the Marvel Universe itself, as expressed by the various published titles, becomes a loosely interconnected, ongoing drama. Some titles may be more essential than others, but they all reflect or explore the newly established status. Admittedly, with House of M, this status quo becomes a background element, only directly affecting the X titles. Future events will make the status quo the story element that affects all titles almost evenly. This leads to the underlying issue with this and all future events. The event merely presents the origin of a problem, not its solution, so there's no sense of finality. There may be a conclusion of sorts, but no resolution. House of M doesn't resolve the problem that it begins with. At the end, Wanda Maximoff is still a threat lingering in the background. Presumably, she's neutralized, but that is never made explicit within the miniseries. This ambiguity is perfectly reasonable in an ongoing title, where unresolved issues may be picked up and addressed later. But within a finite, limited series, there is no later. All that needs to be said should be said within the specified amount of issues. Unfortunately, this does not occur. So it is quite unsatisfying that the reason for the event itself remains outstanding. It makes the overall story feel incomplete. Again, this will become a trait that runs through most future events. The ramifications of this event were quite substantial, the most obvious being the effect it had on the X titles. House of M directly led to a mini-event known as Decimation, where the former mutant population deal with suddenly being on the brink of extinction. Additionally, Wolverine, whose past has always been murky and unexplained, suddenly recovers all his memories. So, after 30 years of existence, his actual origin could finally become canon, as opposed to being one possibility that is neither confirmed nor denied. House of M does something quite unusual for an event. Instead of killing off a character, it brings one back to life. Hawkeye, who was killed and disassembled, is resurrected by Wanda. In fact, one could say, Hawkeye's death and rebirth firmly solidified the character as somewhat untouchable afterwards. It's a rare instance where a character was returned to life during an event, and then went on to have a highly successful, well-regarded solo series. Mind you, there was a surprising level of outrage online concerning Hawkeye's death, so the opportunity to revive the character in House of M does feel like an obvious course correction to satisfy fans. Regardless, it does stand out as an anomaly. In what may be another first, and is one that will also be included in future events, there were tie-in miniseries that fleshed out side stories. While not considered essential reading, some plot points or character beats are explored, giving the overall event more depth. Critically speaking, these tie-ins seem like leftover, non-essential plot beats that didn't have room to be explored in the main story. As a consequence, they feel like narrative padding. At the same time, they make the event feel more complete. It is an interesting contradiction. Presuming the best intentions of the creative teams involved, it's difficult not to conclude these tie-ins are a publisher trying to squeeze the most profit out of an event. That may be an overly cynical point of view, but the tie-ins do read like a corporate decision, not a creative necessity. The danger that Wanda Maximoff represented was vaguely addressed 2 years later in New Avengers number 26. Hawkeye hunts down Wanda and discovers she has no memory of prior events. Furthermore, she seems mostly powerless. It implies Wanda rebooted herself at the end of House of M. However, the 2010 miniseries, Avengers Children's Crusade, fully explores the reason for Wanda's unbalanced frame of mind and provided a final resolution to the overall problem. Prior to Disassembled, Wanda was understandably distraught over the loss of her children. She consulted Dr. Doom for help, since restoring them to life may involve some dark, unconventional magic that her superhero comrades, like Doctor Strange, might not approve of using. She taps into a mystical, powerful life force, which corrupts her and also restores the souls of her children into 2 members of the Young Avengers. This led her to become the unbalanced, destructive force seen in Disassembled and House of M. As a side note, the Wanda found by Hawkeye was quite possibly a robot created by Dr. Doom. He located her shortly after House of M and put a robot in her place in order to protect her. The real Wanda then lived with Doom. End of side note. During Children's Crusade, this corruptive magic is purged from her and she becomes the regular Scarlet Witch once again. Her memory is restored and she becomes dedicated to making amends for past mistakes. The Scarlet Witch series from 2016 explored this journey over the course of its 15 issues. It also establishes she is very much a witch that casts magical spells. So, after 6 years, Wanda Maximoff achieves redemption, and her story, the one that began in Disassembled, finally comes to a conclusion. Between Disassembled and House of M, a pattern that most events will follow begins to emerge. So the mighty Marvel checklist of repeating event elements looks like this. Heroes are pitted against other heroes. There is the death of a usually minor character. The origin of a problem is established, but it's not resolved with any sense of finality. The status quo is altered, advancing the story of the Marvel Universe. There are a variety of titles such as lead-ins, one-shots, and tie-in miniseries published in conjunction with the event. For clarity, the death in House of M is the extinction of mutants. This is also the problem that is established, which is left unresolved. Although it should be noted, Wanda's status is also a dangling thread. The forthcoming event, Civil War, will utilize all of these elements, and for better or for worse, it will firmly entrench the idea that an event is a highly successful publishing venture. Until next time.